2020 has been such a strange and hard year in so many ways. Hi, I'm Craig Dodge, and board member and a longtime staff member with Focus Week at Quartz Mountain Christian Camp. One of the very hard decisions we had to make this year was to close camp for the first time in its 61-year history. And while we're sorry about that, we hope that we could still provide for you some kind of a camp experience. So we've put together a video series for you featuring some of your favorite speakers from camp throughout the summer. Hopefully you'll be able to get together with some of your friends, enjoy a short lesson provided by some of these speakers, and there'll also be a time of singing some of your favorite camp songs introduced by Brother Myron Bruce. While we can't be together physically this year, we hope that you'll be able to get together and enjoy some semblance of camp throughout this summer video series. And I hope that you're making plans right now to join us next summer, Lord willing, at Quartz Mountain Christian Camp 2021. Thank you and God bless you.
But this is a new song. But listen to what it says. It's a call to say, God, I want to be broken. I want to be humbled so that I can give you the honor and the credit. Break my heart, dear Lord. Tear the barriers down. I don't want to be fighting against you. I want to sing, and I want to glorify, and I want to live for you. If you don't know it, sing lead with me. If you do know it and you want to hit the parts, that's great. This is one of the ones that it's a solid one. Let's sing it together. Break my heart, dear Lord, tear it down, show me in convicting tears the glory of your crown. My heart is torn, my soul so weak, the ways of me.
Good day, my name is Dale Hartman. I want to welcome you to the virtual classes that we're going to have that different people will teach, and physically not being able to come to camp, we'd like to welcome you to being able to think about and have some things to do in the place of camp this year. And the thing I'd like to start with is just a reminder that change is just a part of life. And I have a friend, and he just described life as a series of firsts. We start to school for the first time. We maybe have our first job. A young couple may have their first baby. And on the other end, there's a series of lasts. The last time we will do something, and I'm always reminded, everything we do in life, in this world, whether good or bad, we'll sometime do for the last time. And then there's the how many in the middle. And our family, we take our adult children and their spouses and grandchildren to South Texas, and except this year, We've done that for the last 15 years. And we talk about the first times that we have gone. And at some point, as a group, this is a part of life, we'll do that for the last time. The very early camps that were held at a different location than where our current camp is. If you're coming from Lone Wolf and you pass the entrance and you go over the hill past the Baptist camp, and as you go around the curve, there was a state park facility. It's not there anymore, but it was there on the south part, and this is where the first camp was. My sister went. I wasn't old enough to go, but when we took her down, I helped unload the cornflakes and the cereal stuff for that. But the thing that was outstanding in a lot of people's memory is that if the lake is up, there's a spillway that comes under the railroad tracks right there by the curve. And if someone was baptized, they always kept willow branches there, and they would beat the water so the water moccasins would swim across toward the other side. They took the confessions on the bank, and then very quickly they got in and baptized, and they got right out. And my older sister was baptized at camp there on the edge, and that was where the original camp was. When the lake was built, the citizens of the city decided they didn't want to lose what we call the rock house and for it to be underwater. And so sometimes when the lake is way down, you can see a little bit of the original town there. And so the citizens literally moved what we call it the rock house, board by board, and reassembled it, and the camp was started there. And thousands of us have thought about that as Quartz Mountain and have enjoyed that. But everything has its first and it has its last. I want to just ask two questions as we kind of move into some thoughts today. What percentage of the leaders of the Bible finished well? And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but just do a rough estimate. What percentage of the leaders of the Bible finished well? And I was surprised when the answer is it's less than 30%. And one of the things I want to encourage you to do is that as we go through change, let's not forget to stay with God, or maybe even find God as we go through change. And one example that I want to use today is the Israelites. When you look at them, they are very much socially divided. They're not always spiritually united. And they come from Canaan, they come into the land of Egypt. Joseph says for them to tell Pharaoh that they're shepherds, and shepherds were an abomination to the Egyptians, so they would be divided. They would live in the land of Goshen. When a Pharaoh arose who knew not Joseph, then the people again are socially divided as they become slaves. And while we don't know how long they were slaves, we know they were in the land of Egypt for over 400 years. God sends Moses to deliver them. They're socially divided by the Egyptians on several different occasions, but especially at the Red Sea. God separates and prevents the army from wiping them out. They cross through. They fail to enter the promised land, and then they wander for 40 years. And during that time, again, they're very different than the people around them. But one of the things I just want to remind us of is that even within their history, there were times where people are socially divided and maybe not spiritually united. And I'm thinking of the 12 spies. The 12 spies goes into the land. 10 of them feel like we just can't do this. We're like grasshoppers. And thankfully, there were two, Joshua and Caleb, who stood up and they said, no, we can go in and we can take the land. And they chose to stand with God, even during times where they were socially divided from their peers. And I want you just to think about this. They wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And in the book of Numbers, and I'll just give you the reference, it's Numbers 1:46. When they came out of Egypt, and listen carefully, there were 603,550 fighting men. And because they refused to enter the promised land, as they marched around in the desert, then 603,448 of those men died. And Joshua and Caleb were the ones who stood for God. And even when they were both socially and sometimes spiritually divided from their peers, then they chose to stand with God rather than to compromise what they believed to be comfortable with the majority. We're not going to be called to enter the promised land, but Christians are sometimes called words like sojourners, pilgrims, aliens, and there's a real sense that we were never created to be totally at home and totally comfortable in this world. And I want us just to think, what can we learn from the Israelites while we are socially divided and hopefully spiritually united even at a distance? And one of the things that I think is really important is that God says what he means and God means what he says. And we should always have an absolute respect for the Word of God, and obey and obedience is such an important part of finding God and staying with God, especially during times of transition. And God rewards those who are faithful. I went to church camp with young people that they may have been the only New Testament Christian either in their grade, and in one case, even in their whole school. It was a small school. And everybody in the school were participating in a variety of activities. And then here was one person who didn't do that. And you think about going to school and being the only person who is different, both morally and spiritually, and that can be a real challenge. And there are times where we may need to stand alone if we stand with God. And there's this wonderful statement about Caleb, and let me read this to you. It's in Numbers 14, 24 through 25, and I'm thinking of the two, Joshua and Caleb, but here's Caleb. My servant Caleb has a different spirit and has followed me fully. I will bring him into the land where he went, and his descendants will possess it. Here's something I wonder. Joshua and Caleb are among the people who wander in the wilderness for 40 years as an entire generation dies, but they had been into the promised land as spies. Do you think they ever closed their eyes at night and were dreaming about a land flowing with milk and honey, a land with grapes that needed to be carried on a pole? And I wonder if there were times while they were in the oppression and the heat of the desert, that in their mind's eye, they could see themselves crossing the Jordan and entering the promised land as God had promised them. We're not called to take the land of Canaan, but there are things that God has called us to do, and I want just to help us to remember a couple of things that to me are kind of like a grip on God. And the first one is, God is our Father. And I love the passage in Ephesians 3, and you'll see 14 and 15, where God is the Father of every family in heaven and on earth. And as we lose family members, meaning they pass away, they don't cease to exist. They become a part of God's family in heaven. And how often did Jesus just refer to him as Father? And we're never alone. We're never separate from the presence of God. When we think of Jesus, there's so many things. He is Emmanuel. He is God with us. He is our high priest. He has gone into the Holy of Holies. He has taken his blood. But he also intercedes for us. And you'll find this in Hebrews 7, 24 and 25. Jesus always lives to intercede for us. And think about this. When you and I pray, he prays. And that's also true of the Spirit. With the Spirit, we are sealed, a sign of ownership. We are sealed with the Spirit, and the Father and the Son and the Spirit want us to know that wherever we are and whatever we're doing, spiritually, we're never alone. We may be alone socially, but we're not alone spiritually. So I'd like to just kind of summarize some things for us to think about. And one of these is, I'd like for us to think about the importance of anticipating our eternal reward. I love the movie Field of Dreams, and James Earl Jones, as the reporter, is given the chance to go out into this mythical cornfield and meet the figures of the past. I sometimes watch the movie just to see the expression on his face of anticipation. And I think at times when we are socially divided, and even sometimes where we're standing alone, it would do us all good to think about, I wonder what it will be like to enter the gates of a city that is never locked. I wonder what it will be like to enter through the gates of pearl. I wonder what it'll be like to walk streets of gold. I wonder what it will be like to partake of the tree of life and to be around the throne of God. And anticipation is, to me, a very important part of our growth and our continued faithfulness. A line from that movie says, what was it? If you build it, they will come. And how often did Jesus talk about my Father, my Father's house? I go to prepare a place for you. And at times, we will all be alone in some capacity, and we just need to remember that's in this world, and never lose sight of anticipating the joy of what life will be in the world to come. It's an older song. We don't sing it as much. There's two versions, but one of the versions says, I am bound for the promised land. I am bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I am bound for the promised land. And if in our lives we always know where we're going, and remember, Jesus says, I know where I came from, I know where I'm going in John 8. And those times that we are socially divided, we need to remember, like Jesus, we know where we came from and we know where we're going. And the same way that Joshua and Caleb anticipated the promised land, we need to anticipate our eternal reward. But while we're on the journey, as often as possible, let's surround ourselves with good friends. And let me just say this very quickly. For those of you who are dating, there's two questions I like for young people to ask themselves. And the first one is, will this person help me get to heaven? And I've seen people date someone in order to reform them or to change them. And it's a much healthier situation to be thinking, I want to date a person who will actually help me get to heaven. And the second question is, if something happens to me and we have children, will this person help my children get to heaven? And I think of two specific marriages where the other spouse was not a Christian and the Christian has died. The kids don't go to church. There's no spiritual values. Surround yourselves with good friends. Remember the negative warning, evil companions corrupt good morals. And what a blessing for David to have a Jonathan. What a blessing for Jesus to have a John the Baptist. What a blessing for Paul to have Barnabas. And then you think of these great women like Hannah and Esther. And while we are socially divided, we need to maintain contact with spiritually minded friends. And one of the blessings of camp is the privilege of doing that and sharing with people of like mind. I want to close by challenging you to be one of those 30% who finish well. Some died young, some limped home when you look at the leaders, some just faded away and quit. Less than 30% of the leaders finished well. I challenge you to be one of those 30. And while you're going to camp, and Lord willing, we'll be able to do that again later, and while you live your life, and let's use the expression, while you run the race, then commit yourself to finishing well. I have a dear friend, and we were in the A-frame cabins, which we kept the doors open in the summertime, hoping a breeze would come by. But we were in Boys Cabin 3, and we were asleep. John L. Maples grew up in Durban, South Africa. And from the time he was 5 until he was 17. And this was kind of in the middle of camp, and everyone was asleep. Some raccoons came and turned some of the trash cans over. And here was this clang, clang, clang. John sat up in bed and said, "Rhinoceros!" I like to fell on my bed. I thought, yes, John, every person in Oklahoma, every person in western Oklahoma, when something like that happens, the first thing they think of is rhinoceros. But having grown up in South Africa, that was his context. And you don't sleep together, you sleep separate. So if one gets stepped on, the others can help. But the reason I'm telling you this is that John has a favorite line from a song, and that is, even when he partakes of the Lord's Supper, there's this wonderful song called The Mercy Seat. And it talks again being at the mercy seat of God. But his favorite line from this song is this: there is a place where spirits blend, where friend holds fellowship with friend. Though sundered far, by faith they meet around one common mercy seat. And we have friends in Australia, we have friends in other parts of the world, and oftentimes on Sunday, as I partake of the Lord's Supper with a local church family, I also think of friends and family that I know who are far away. And though sundered far, at this point we are socially divided. Though sundered far, by faith we meet around one common mercy seat. And in our faith in Christ, in our commitment to live for Him, and in our commitment to be His sons and His daughters, we are spiritually united, even though for the time we are geographically separated. And I just want to encourage you, find God in change, commit yourself to finish well, and while we're here, enjoy the opportunities to be with each other both spiritually and emotionally, even though there's times that we're separated from each other by distance. God bless. Thank you.